2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep going.
call to order the February 3rd, 2020 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who is here this evening, as well as those of you who are viewing from home. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session January 30th regarding personnel and security, and an executive session prior to this meeting regarding negotiations. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, then we will go into communications. The first item under communications this evening, we have an employee who is retiring with greater than 25 years in the district. Bill McVicker is retiring on April 1st of this school year, and he's been with the district for 25 years. Bill has been one of our trusted bus drivers since he was hired on July 18th, 1994, making sure his passengers got to school and arrived home safely. Director of Transportation Van Swager commended Bill for his work, saying he was a dedicated employee. He was extremely good with the students, and they all loved him. The board would like to thank Bill for his service and wish him all the best in his retirement. Okay. Then Dr. O'Donnell?
I do have a couple items. I'd like to welcome our math faculty that were able to join us tonight, and also recognize our school counselors. It is National School Counseling Week this week, so we want to celebrate our school counselors throughout the district. This past weekend, the State High wrestling team captured their first District 6 title since 2003 on Saturday, and congratulations to Coach Cummins, as well as all the other staff members and the wrestlers for breaking through after 17 years, so well done. Our summer youth fair, you might think it's a long time off. I just had an update from our earth science teacher in the back about the weather this week. Pretty warm today. I think we're in for a tough second half of the week. But it's the right time for making some plans. So our annual summer youth fair is coming up, featuring more than 50 area summer camp providers for children in preschool through 12th grade. It'll take place on February 15th from 10 to 2 at Mount Nittany Middle School. So mark your calendars and start thinking about summer months. Finally, we are meeting with all of our preschools coming up, and because the preschool fair that we usually host didn't happen this year, so pending that conversation, we've had some positive responses so far. We might be hosting a preschool fair, so I'll bring that back to the board and community if we're going that direction. So
Wonderful.
that's all I had for this evening.
Okay. Board members, any communication items?
Thanks.
Lori?
I just want to thank the administration and our culinary arts students and teachers for an amazing lunch. We were all treated to a spectacular buffet of many salads and soups and breads, and the kids did an incredible job. So, and dessert. Yeah, it was great. So thanks to the administration, and thanks for the students and teachers for doing that. That was special.
Yeah.
Really nice. Any other announcements? Then with that, we have Nathan Maines, who is the director of PSBA here this evening. And he's, I think.
Here, I assume.
Yep, should be live.
Good evening. Thank you for granting me a couple of minutes on your agenda. Wanted to just come up tonight and recognize 3 of your fellow board members with PSBA service recognitions. PSBA does this to recognize 8 years of service and then sequentially each additional 4 years of service beyond that. So looking back at the term that just ended in December, we wanted to come up and recognize people that had completed 8 years and beyond. And we have 3 recognitions tonight. On behalf of PSBA, we want to recognize first Laurel Zidney with 8 years of school board service. Congratulations. Another 8-year recognition for 8 years of school board service to Amber Concepcion. Amber. And finally, this one, a little bit longer service, but also kind of special for PSBA. David Hutchinson has been our president for last year, did an outstanding job. He's our current immediate past president, so we're still occupying some of his time, but I hope not as much. Wanted to thank all of you for loaning him to us. He really has been an essential part of PSBA. He's been there, we talked about this the other day, really most of the time that I've been at PSBA and was there even before I arrived. So he's been a long-time champion of PSBA, advocate, and we were thrilled that he agreed to serve last year as our president. Again, did a magnificent job, and it's my pleasure to thank him on behalf of PSBA for his service last year and recognize 16 years of service to the State College School Board. So David, 16 years of service. David looked a little nervous when I usually say something about him now. It's accompanied by some kind of weird hat. So for those of you that were at conference last year, you saw what we did to him there. But he was a great sport about it. Just beyond that, to thank all of you. We're just wrapping up School Board Director Recognition Month. All that you do, I don't know if everybody in your community or in communities across the state recognize, first of all, that you as school directors really manage some of the largest local government budgets in Pennsylvania, and you do it really without taking a pay raise, I'm told, year after year in State College. So you have agreed to keep earning what you've always earned, which is nothing, but really out of a generosity of spirit and a desire to make sure that every child has the best possible quality public education that they can have in every community. So hopefully through our continued work and your continued efforts in State College, we'll draw more and more attention to the fact that school board directors, and I'm a little biased, are really the unsung heroes of local government for all that they give and that they do. So again, on behalf of PSBA, thank you to all three of the folks we recognize tonight, and thank you to all of you for your support of PSBA and for public education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, the next item on our agenda is legislative update, and noting that PSBA Advocacy Day is coming up as well. So, and that's an opportunity for school board members from across the state to meet in Harrisburg at the Capitol and have discussions with legislators and their aides there. So, legislative.
Can I add one item to that? Something that we may want to consider prior to that is updating a resolution on charter schools. I'm sure that'll be one of our key items. And we had one that we passed in 2013, I believe, and we may have updated since then. But if we can change some of the numbers around, to clean that up.
The timing would be good to do that with the push on charter school reform legislation. Yeah. Lori, anything from the legislative?
No, the call is next week, so I'll have an update at the next meeting.
Great.
Do you want to see if we can fit that on the policy agenda item on the 18th of February, and then
Oh.
Yeah. Updating the resolution.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Good.
that would get us,
Great.
yeah, we'd have time then to bring it through the board. We can see if we can do that. We'll talk to Lori about that.
Prior to Advocacy Day.
Okay. Yep.
That would be good. Okay, and we have a COG report, which might be more extensive than usual this time.
Yes. So the COG report today is all about the Parks and Rec master plan, the study done on the outdoor and indoor spaces for Parks and Rec. And so the report has come out. It's 340 pages. So I sort of was asked to give the Cliff Notes version in case people don't have time to read 340 pages. And so that's what I'm giving tonight, is the Cliff Note version of this master plan. And we worked on this committee for around 2 years, so there's a lot of work involved. And it is really supposed to be a living document that our community, the center region, can look to plan and prioritize for recreational needs and wants in the area. And as the COG liaison for the school district, that's what I am going to focus on in my summary to you all, is what is relevant to the school district. And so there's 2 specific recommendations that the report has for the school district. And One is an MOU. So this is from core theme 5 in the report. And I'm just going to read this. This is directly from the report. So there's a specific recommendation to adopt a memorandum of understanding with the State College Area School District. And it says the buildings and grounds of the State College Area School District are important recreational resources for the center region. Use of those facilities for community recreation programs and activities, particularly the indoor facilities, is essential for CRPR operations. A written memorandum of understanding between CRPR and the State College Area School District would ensure that school buildings and grounds remain available for public use for recreation activities and improve the access to facilities. Promotion of CRPR recreation opportunities through the school district is another area for cooperation. And so there's nothing specific about what the content of an MOU would be, but it's definitely specific that it's a recommendation of the consultants who were hired to put together the plan. And I'll go into further depth on that in just a minute. But I wanted to secondly give the second specific recommendation that is from the report for pertaining to the school district, which is recommendation 10.2 under amend the Articles of Incorporation of the Parks and Recreation Authority. And so it says here, the Articles of Incorporation of the Parks and Recreation Authority should accurately reflect the 5 municipalities that support CRPR. Half Moon Township's not included because they do not contribute financially. Amending the Articles of Incorporation should also include adding the State College Area School District as an official member of the authority with the ability to appoint its representatives. So currently, the borough appoints a SCASD representative. And so this change would be that the school district itself appoints the representative to the authority. The roles and responsibilities of the authority should be spelled out in the amended Articles of Incorporation. The membership of the authority should be expanded to include 1 elected official or municipal staff member from each municipality plus 1 resident. This would eliminate the need for the COG Parks Capital Committee. The State College Area School District should be represented by 1 elected school board member and 1 school district administrator, potentially the director of buildings and grounds or athletic director. This would expand the authority from 6 to 12 members. So this is the second recommendation. So it would be not only that the district would choose its own, but actually there'd be 2. There'd be 1 elected official on the authority and then 1 person from administration. So those are the 2 very specific recommendations, and you'd have to really comb through the 340 pages to figure that out. So I thought I would just give that to you right here, right now. There they are. Those are the 2. I wanted to just give you a little bit more context, and there's a lot in the report, if you take a look at it, about the importance of the school district in the community's recreational needs and uses. And I mean, almost on every page. So it's really incredible how they see it very differently, I think, than the school district has, because I don't think I haven't heard much talk about it, but they have. So I wanted to give you some context there. CRPR views the school district as a partner, and that through these partnerships, that's how recreational needs are delivered, and that without these partnerships, it wouldn't be able to happen. And specifically, I thought it was interesting in the plan, they give success factors, that there's several factors that set the stage for this plan to be successful. There's 11. Number 10 is the involvement and cooperation of the State College Area School District. And so they're saying that literally the plan cannot be successful without the cooperation and involvement of the school district. The plan core themes, address indoor recreation facility and program space needs was one of the main things they wanted to do. And again, throughout the document, it says they partner with the school district and to utilize indoor venues and fields. And there's a lot in here about when that doesn't work out, and that hence the need for the MOU. So obviously, that would be something that we'll have to discuss in committee, but this is a need that has surfaced from the plan. And then also the consultants who worked on the plan have done other similar plans in other areas throughout Pennsylvania. So they're looking at what happens in other areas and then where are their deficits here. And this is one of the deficits, is indoor space, especially in the winter. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that, again, I think directly pertains to the school district is that once kids hit like tweens, teens age, there are not a lot of recreation opportunities other than pay to play and travel teams. And of course, with pay to play, anybody who can't afford that is sort of eliminated from participation, because when travel teams started to increase, that's when the CRPR offerings started to decrease. And so it really kind of eliminated the opportunity for certain income levels. And so, and then also the age issue with fewer opportunities for tweens and teens. And so these are other important things I think that the plan has highlighted. And this is through, I should give some context, extensive surveys. So there was an online survey that was up for months, and anybody was able to participate in that survey, and that's also where these needs came from. There's a great need in our community, according to the surveys, for people want to stay active in the winter months, and that it's really hard to do that here, especially because it's sort of based on income. So that was something that surfaced. And then also, I wanted to highlight that we in the district, we have talked about, for example, nature-based playgrounds. This is actually something that's also in the plan for CRPR, that they're also looking at a nature-based playground or playgrounds. And then another thing that I think has been discussed here in SCASD is the idea that open space on SCASD property that is not currently being used for recreation doesn't need to be mowed, for example, that those open spaces that are not used for recreation could be returned to naturalized native species, meadows, reforestation, that would minimize maintenance, so decrease cost, but it's also, by introducing these natural areas, would also be more sustainable. And so this is also a theme that has been highlighted in the plan. So I just thought it was sort of interesting that some things that we are doing or have talked about doing are also being recommended in the plan regionally, and they are looking towards national groups that study this and what are best practices, and so good for us. I think we're on the right track there, and I just wanted to point that out. I also wanted to point out that another thing that came through loud and clear in the surveys is that outdoor facility use in the center region is limited due to the lack of facility lighting. And so fields that have lighting are in high demand. And so that was obvious in the online survey, and there was also a snail mail survey that was statistically valid. A group from a class at Penn State did all the statistical analysis. And then there were also 3 community meetings where the community was invited. They were held at the high school to come and give input, and the need for lighting on fields was prevalent in all 3 forums, the online, the snail mail, and the public meetings. So I just thought that was something to highlight. And again, just the need for the facility usage, and then the fields. The fields are overused in our area and don't have time to don't have enough break to maintain health. according to the consultants. And so just a high demand for field space. And then community groups also use the school district's fields and indoor facilities. And so, here's a quote from the plan. The school district is the largest potential provider of indoor and outdoor locations for community recreation programs. So they really look to the school district for recreation space, indoor and outdoor. And then I just wanted to, this will be the last thing that I will talk about, but I wanted to mention that they do give a brief history of the school district and COG, CRPR relationship, and it goes back to, it says CRPR beginnings date back to 1928 when the State College Recreation Board was established by Borough Council. In 1946, the Borough and the State College Area School District began, so this is 1946, to jointly fund the community recreation program. And so there's a history of joint funding. In 1966, the school district stopped providing funding support, and the Borough Recreation Board was reorganized as the State College Area Recreation Board. The new board consisted of 7 members representing State College Borough, townships of College, Ferguson, Half Moon, Harrison, Patton, and the State College Area School District. So there's a long history of the school district and CRPR working together to provide recreation space. So I just thought that was interesting that it dates all the way back to 1928. So anyway, this plan is online, and I sent everybody an email with it. It's also on the agenda for tonight. There's a link. And what will be coming up specifically is we will discuss whether our board wants to vote to accept the plan, and then also at some point we will be embarking on this conversation of the MOU. So vote-wise, those are the two possibilities that have been presented to me as the COG liaison. So thanks for listening. It's an interesting document if you want to go read it yourself, but those are the Cliff Notes.
Gretchen, can they give us some specifics of what they mean by improving access to schools, so that we understand how that differs from the board policy that's in place now? Do you know what I mean? That's what we need, I think, to understand what would that change regarding our relationship, and how does that impact all the other community groups in the schools, and those, just so that when we go to, I'd assume we'd go to Facility and Grounds Committee with this to consider. That would help us to understand what homework do we need to do for the board to track down info,
Yeah.
whether it's athletic directors or where people book spaces in Ed's office, those types of things, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I'll be communicating with them about that and have answers, more context.
Okay.
Yep.
Questions from the rest of the board? Questions?
Excuse me.
Thank you. I was impressed with the thoroughness of the document and the process. It seemed like they were really thoughtful in how they designed the process for coming to the strategic plan.
I will say, yes, it's incredibly thorough, and there is now a park inventory with a code for whatever. So if you want to go out and do X, Y, or Z, and you're wondering, oh, what park should I go to? Or I've never been to that park, I've never heard of that park, which was actually one thing that surfaced from the surveys. We have so many parks. Our area is so fortunate that people actually aren't even familiar with all of them. But through this new system, you can actually look and see, oh, this one has a pavilion and restrooms, and I didn't realize they did, and so I'm going to have my 10-year party there, for example. So it's an inventory of all the different possible offerings, and really quite useful just for all of us who live here. So very thorough.
Okay, so there will be some further discussion at Facilities and Grounds this week then on the comprehensive plan. And
I
next
believe
steps.
so,
Okay.
yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so at this time, we have time on the agenda for public comment. Each individual is limited to comments of up to 3 minutes, as time permits, for items on the agenda or related to board business, if anyone here would like to make a comment. Okay. All right, seeing none then, we will be moving on to routine approvals. I'd like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on routine approvals? Laurel?
I just had a couple of questions on the service contracts, both for technology and the physical plant.
Okay.
The one with technology, there's one for online driver safety, and is that for our students or for bus drivers?
Would be students.
Students, okay. And then the other was really more of a question in terms of timing with the striping of the field. And I haven't been over there lately, but I know that at one point we had been using, there had been bleachers and all there because it's been being used with Memorial Field not being completed. And I was wondering if the striping will happen after those things have been removed, or if that was going to be waiting till Memorial Field is on lot.
So this is striping of the running track itself,
Right.
not the field within the running track?
So it's just the running track?
Just the running track, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about that.
Okay.
Okay, so whenever it happens, it's,
We'd like to have it done prior to the spring
Season.
track season.
yeah. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on routine approvals? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving on to action items. Item A is a motion to approve the elementary project change orders as seen in attachment 5A.
So moved?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes. Okay, that item has passed. Item B is a motion to approve the high school project change orders as shown in attachment 5B.
So moved?
Second. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item C is a motion to approve the purchase of varsity football uniforms as shown in attachment 5C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item D is a motion to approve the purchase of video camera equipment as recommended in attachment 5D.
So moved?
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Fozart.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes. Okay, that item has passed. Then moving on to information discussion items. Area A is District Goal Category Student Learning. The first item is a proposal with the International Institute for Restorative Practices to provide on-site coaching regarding student handbook revisions, and this is shown in attachment 6A1. So we have Dr. Stout at the table here with us and Jean Knaus from Student Services.
Good evening. This is a follow-up to our restorative practices training. By the end of this school year, we will have all of our staff members K through 12 trained in restorative practices. It's 2 full days of training. And we believe that the next logical step is to take a look at our student handbooks and make sure that our student handbooks and our discipline practices are aligned with restorative practices. So what you'll see this evening is a proposal that Jean Knaus put forward. She's our lead trainer for restorative practices and has been in contact with the Restorative Practices Institute. So this is a proposal that we put together to review all of our handbooks at the elementary, middle school, and high school levels to make sure that they're aligned with restorative practices. Matt, anything?
Jean?
I don't. That was very nice job.
Sure, thank you.
We don't have the expertise yet to move ourselves in that direction, so getting their expertise here, I think, makes a big difference. Although I do look to myself to pursue a master's in that area, but I'm not there yet. So hopefully we can pick up that ball and take it ourselves soon.
All right. Questions from the board?
Perfect, it's great.
Actually, I do have
Okay.
a great deal of gratitude for your adoption and for promotion of these practices within the school district, particularly in relation to trying to enhance school climate, trying to enhance that at the classroom level, use of the restorative circles and other forms of training and staff development. I think that's building our capacity to deal with these kinds of things. So I think that's good. That's all good. I think in this instance, though, I wonder, among other things, about this moving into the administrative side of life, if you will, in terms of the way in which we manage our behavioral expectations in the handbooks. This is about, for want of a better word, the discipline system that we follow in terms of our expectations for kids and so on. And it also involves a number of stakeholders who deal with these procedures every day. The assistant principals particularly are involved with these activities, and counselors to some extent are in terms of following up on discipline events. Families, of course, hear about these requirements and expectations. And this is the way it's being presented to me, at least from what I can tell. And please clarify for me and for all of us to this question. Restorative practices is a kind of one of a number of different conceptual and theoretical and research-based ways of thinking about behavior. And in terms of how adults relate to student behavior. Okay, so then there are others out there. I wouldn't begin to count how many. And they're probably represented in terms of the training of our staff. So I guess one of the first questions I would have is, to what extent are these changes that we're recommending? We're recommending changes to the handbooks. To what extent have we other stakeholders participating in this conversation about these changes? Are there stakeholders, obviously, Will, you're representing the administration on this, but are there stakeholders at the building level who deal with these kinds of questions all the time, who can help to have this conversation with the restorative practices people about any recommendations that they're making? And also, are there other individuals or areas of expertise, like in the area of mental health, for example, or the behavioral side of special education? They may have perceptions about what the handbook, how it might be redesigned. Are we involving them equally in a conversation about how the handbook should be redesigned? To the extent that we're talking, these are the things I'm wondering about.
Yeah, no, those are great wonderings. Well, the first step was to understand that this would be okay to move forward with. The next step is working with the building principals on establishing their teams. So there'll be one full day for elementary, one for middle school, and one for high school, and that would be the initial process. The entire team will not probably attend on those days for many reasons, from substitute availability to the size of the space. What will happen at that is they'll establish a groundwork and a process moving forward, and then expand on their teams and probably work on some of that over the summer. It will be a process. It's not going to be done in 1 year. It'll be something we may need to even survey and investigate and look into our stakeholders throughout the year, and it might be a continual improvement process. So it's not going to be one day and done, and we're only going to have administrators and a couple people there. Right. We've talked about having school psychologists, counselors there, special ed there, the behavior specialists, like all of those people, in addition to classroom teachers who often are left questioning what has happened, what was the consequence, what are we looking at, so that they have an understanding of where we're coming from and why this is being put in place. So definitely a focus of ours and a priority, and we will definitely establish those teams. But first step was getting this, and the next step is establishing what those teams will look like.
And I would just add, Dan, that we're going to take some recommendations and help them facilitate and guide us through the process, but ultimately we'll take their input and then we decide the direction that we want to go. I know one of the the common misnomers regarding restorative practices is that it eliminates the consequences, and all the training and discussions that I've had, that it's not in lieu of consequences. If there are behavior infractions, there needs to be a solid discipline plan with the consequences, and then the restorative piece comes in afterward to repair those relationships and change the behavior as well.
So, and I guess as the last question, if you think of the school district as kind of a single subject, in other words, our system is coming under the lens of their approach to dealing with behavioral differences in students, okay? So our whole system will come under the lens of that. Are there other school districts who also have participated in this, whom we can consult in terms of their experience? Has that happened, or would that be something we should be doing to see what other school districts have to say about this experience?
Yes, and that will be part of the process. So I am working really closely with IIRP in identifying that, and they will refer us to any district we want. There are plenty around Baltimore, Bethlehem, all those areas that within Pennsylvania we can actually look at and even go observe and find out what's happening there.
Just to help us in terms of kind of making, we're going to be dealing with, having a conversation with people we respect, obviously, and I appreciate the direction they've given us up to this point. But this is a whole different layer. This is a whole systemic review rather than something which is based on training individual teachers to work in classroom with groups of kids. This is a much larger scope in terms of what we're undertaking. So I think the more we can understand the nature of that experience, I think will empower our people locally to have conversations with the specialists who are come to work with us. Seems to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this could be, I appreciate both of you for sharing, this could be a, multi-year, because when we look at what accountability looks like, my understanding with the training was that, focusing on the impact of a student's behavior on whether it's themselves or those around them, and then, how does that accountability look? And I think that's going to be a paradigm shift for us. Now, obviously, we want to change behavior.
You bet.
And then the other aspect in moving forward, which is the restorative piece, how does that student whose behavior impacted others or themselves, how do they make it right? And, so those are some steps that I think to formalize that in writing within our community will be a paradigm shift for us. I do think from a standpoint of, that mirrors what we want to do in life, because we all make mistakes, and, owning it and making it right is what, we want to teach students. So I think when we go from a consequence-based system only and we focus on the rule that was broken, I think sometimes we miss the opportunity to help a student learn how to, behave forward and make it right, because that's what you're going to want to do when you're older, whether it's in your career or with your family, what have you. So
You bet.
I think it's a great opportunity for us, although I'm scared.
Yeah, it's about reintegrative shame, separating the deed from the doer, high control, high support.
Right.
That's really, in a nutshell, what we need to do.
Well, and those principles are one of the things I think, as I'm getting in baby steps, learning about these programs and the underlying principles that behind them, so that's underneath, that support them. I'm and having conversations where you've been living in this world for quite a while, you can just very naturally talk about those kinds of things because you own them, you understand them, you know them deeply. So it's the fact that we're just getting to the point where in this year, from what I understand it, simply introducing this to the entire elementary staff, for example, for the very first time. So they're just beginning to put their toes in the water of this. So how can we, in a sense, allow the district to catch up so that they can, as they're reviewing the impact of these in terms of our behavioral expectations, the way in which we relate to students who might need more support for behavior at the building level, how do we allow those who are making those decisions every day to know this almost as well as you do, Gene? That's That's my hope in all this.
And that's where I feel confident that we do have the resources to do, and I think building those teams in each building. Currently, I'm working very closely with Park Forest Middle School because they were ahead of the game. They had trained several years ago, and we meet monthly, and we're developing those supports and those systems. And now that we're all trained at the elementary, we can start looking at developing those teams and taking those baby steps and dipping our toes and feet in a little bit more and start practicing those and modeling that and kind of doing some reciprocative teaching. So that I feel confident we can do ourselves, where with this piece I feel because it is a touchy subject and it is something that requires a lot of attention and a lot of stakeholders at the table, I feel like having their expertise come in makes a lot of sense.
Laurel,
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I think we've all, many of us have had the opportunity to be trained over the summer, and I appreciate that opportunity and certainly the direction the district has taken in looking at this in terms of just our not just even discipline, but our overall school climate, hopefully preventing things getting to the discipline level. So I've been pleased with that, and I'm definitely supportive of the concept. What I'm wondering is the advantage of doing this at this time, given, I think, and you had said, well, things are just, at the end of this year, the staff will all be trained. I'm not sure whether that's just the professional staff or like who else is included, but what is the advantage of doing this? It felt a little, as I read this, like cart before horse.
Right.
So if you could help me with that.
I think our thinking is it's baby steps through this, and we need to start somewhere. And at Tandem Places, one of the biggest things that we're being challenged on right now is the consequence piece, that high control piece. What are we doing with that? So we need to start looking at that closely so that we can have people feel comfortable and understanding what the process is. A lot of people have the understanding that restorative practices means no consequence, or restoring a relationship is the only consequence, and that's not at all the way it is. And so I think doing both of these in tandem so that they can see we're all working in the same direction and doing things together, and that starting with baby steps. When I spoke to IIRP, their direction was, you need to start small, you need to do surveying, you need to start this process and really looking forward. So they'll spend that day with us and give us a process moving forward, and we'll develop that along the way. So while we're developing that, we can also work with our building teams in understanding that process and what that will look like. So I feel like it makes sense to do it at the same time, because one really impacts the administrative piece and the parent piece, which we're also looking to do some training in, while the other one is the building teacher piece. And so how those mesh together, I think is important to do together.
And I would say, too, that typically the handbook review is pretty cursory in the summertime. The assistant principals will get together and just a few small tweaks, nothing really significant, just some minor changes in board policy. And I think this gives us an opportunity to apply a broader lens to our whole process of working with students.
Yeah, that small part of that involved the half a day of, getting some expertise to look at our handbooks, particularly with this, made a lot of sense to me. I was having more trouble understanding the additional value of having them come in at this point, and also thinking about, we've talked about various things in the handbook that we have thought we might want to revisit, and whether whether we would do for a broader focused handbook revision as opposed to just, this seemed like a lot of resources put into this one small area, which is a comprehensive area, but there were some other things that we had talked about looking at with the handbook.
And my understanding is their focus is pretty broad, right, in terms of the handbook, right?
And the handbook's a procedure, so that's not a board
Right.
policy. But we're inconsistent. Okay, so if we want to move forward and implement restorative practices in a manner that we're walking our talk, then our handbooks, especially with the most sensitive aspect of the handbooks, the behavior related, are really inconsistent with the focus on the behaviors, changing behaviors, not simply looking at a spreadsheet and doling out suspensions or detentions, because that's the way we've done it. So I do think, I'm not suggesting this will be revamped for the fall, but if we can take a baby step in how we go about that, including how our expectations on students and those involved to repair where harm's been done. That's a huge step for us, because if you read what we have in that handbook, especially things that get to you in relationship to expulsions,
Right.
we are not in line with this approach. With that said, I'm grateful it doesn't get rid of accountability. I think how we go about accountability is what I'm interested to really understand. How do these other systems that are really, so to speak, further along than us, how does it look there? And what might, what do we believe, including, I appreciate that, Dan, as well, the different stakeholders here.
Yeah.
What resonates with our people, because, the people that are working with the kids day to day, is that gonna work? I'm sure it's gonna be discussed.
And I think that this is, if our commitment is educating the whole child, then we need it to not be just a flow chart. We need to accept that there's differences and complexity and nuance to every situation, and each individual child's situation that contributes to whatever the behavior happens. So I think, this is critical, actually, to both our climate and to continuing to reaffirm our commitment to students and our respect for students, that they're a part of this process. If that makes sense. That's my opinion.
Timing-wise, I guess if we waited a year, which I think that's a good question, Laurel. I think the pros and cons. I think we would definitely, I think, miss an opportunity to take advantage of the conversations and the learning while it's happening here, to understand how does this interface with an aspect of how we work with students that we know isn't aligned. I don't know, Jean, that I would defer to Jean on the time.
I would just want to add, one of the things that we were very explicit about with our IRP is the trainer that they send. We also want to have expertise in equity, and they have someone for us that I'm ready to interview once we get the go-ahead here. But we also thought that piece is something we need to hit the iron while it's hot also, and kind of maximize that. So in the sense, if you think it's really going to be a multi-year process, and having this summer to really do some of the building. We find ourselves in the middle of the year often building the plane in the air. This will give us the opportunity to really talk about what are we going to roll out next year? What kind of surveys do we want to do? How can we do this purposely? So I feel like it makes sense to do now. And also, I feel like one of the biggest questions and doubts on people's mind is the consequence piece. I think this will be really explicit in helping people understand how consequence and restorative practices align. And we have that high control and high support and what that looks like.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I agree with you, Dr. O'Donnell. I mean, this is, as we find out more and more about this, as I'm thinking as a faculty or staff member, we realize that there's inconsistencies about what our current policies are, our current handbooks are, and these practices. And I think I agree with you, Jean, in terms of starting to fix them this summer, or at least take inventory of where the inconsistencies are and try to draw them closer together. I think it's probably a good idea to start earlier than we think on this.
And it's not just restorative practices that are incongruent with our handbook approach.
Sure.
Behavioral analysts would take exception to the way in which we intervene with behavior through the handbook approach. So there are a number of different voices about this that we need to be prepared to listen to and attend to in terms of revisiting what the handbook has to say, because it's yes, the restorative practices not philosophy, but theory and practice would do things differently, but there are behaviorists that we have on staff who would also look at this as an opportunity to rethink the way in which we're dealing with behavioral infractions.
Correct. What else over here? So, yeah, I'm really supportive of moving forward with this for the reasons that have been stated. I guess two questions I had. One was about how this kind of crosswalks with classroom management, like techniques or expectations to make sure that simply even at the classroom level, our teachers being supported in terms of having that toolbox of classroom management techniques before things get to a point where you're consulting a handbook. And then my other question was just about parent or community communication once we're at the end of this I shouldn't say the end of the process. Once we get further along in the process and have handbook revisions, just thinking about, having communications with families so that people understand why we're making these changes and why it's important.
Would you like me to address
Yes,
those?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one, as far as teachers having tools, a lot of what restorative practices are tools for them. So there are the question cards for impromptu conferencing. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? What do you need to move forward? How can we make this better? Those are tools in and of itself. It's not the why. Why'd you did that? You sit over here while you think about what you've done. So it's giving them those tools and being really explicit about them. I think the practice in using them and really kind of giving them the time and the tools to practice that. Restorative circles also, and building community. That's a huge thing for the schools and the buildings right now. Not realizing that you need a lot of time to do that. You don't. Circles can be a quick check-in, a check-out, can be a quick review of a test. It can be anything. So I know at Park Forest right now, they just concluded, they actually did some videos of themselves doing circles and shared them with staff, which was hugely effective because a lot of times staff are seeing the circles as being something maybe they're apprehensive about, and seeing that it can flow naturally and it can be not an event. It's a way of doing things. So I feel like they have those tools. We just need to start utilizing them and see the effects of them. And those can be reminders in the classroom. The teachers will use the question cards. Teachers will use affective statements. Teachers will use the FAIR process and, be in the social discipline window and all that kind of information. As far as the teachers or the parents, what I'm finding through the Counselor Advisory Council that several of the board members are part of is that the parents really don't know much about this. Even though we did offer it through Straight Talk, it was just a small group and it didn't catch anyone's attention yet. Well, now that it's gaining momentum and it's catching more and more attention, I'm happy to do another Straight Talk. We talked about doing Saturday trainings for parents. I know Sue Marshall and Linda Brown are going to conduct a fidelity training for probably up to about 50 parents. It'll be on Thursday nights and Sunday evenings, so they have a choice between a weekend or an evening time. So really kind of getting the word out. In addition, we're training providers in March, 2-day fidelity training, so our local providers are actually talking the same talk. So really kind of continuing to do that training piece, even though we feel for the most part we're trained within, I think it's important for the families and the community to also have that training. So we're offering that free. The only cost would be the books. If we start running low, we'll charge for the books because there is a fee to that, but the training itself we'll do just because we feel like it makes sense to do that. And then we have a plan to offer for new teachers for induction next year. So in answer to your two questions, I feel like
you've been really
the tools
thorough.
are there,
Yeah.
we just got to use them, and then we do need to do more training with families and community.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Jean helps us integrate into, we only pull our administrators once a month when we meet, and we begin with some of the strategies here, just one for our own community development, but also to revisit the strategies, and Jean helps lead us in that, and it's been going well.
It's building community.
Great. Thank you. It would be helpful if this was moved to action, if we were interested in doing that, right?
Very, yes.
Yeah. So
I'd like to make a motion to move it to action.
I'll second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded.
I'm not comfortable with doing that.
So I think we would have a vote then on the motion to move it to action.
Yes.
Right. So that would be a roll call vote, right? Okay. So
Isn't
we'll
that
have
a unanimous consent?
Yeah, that's a departure from past practice.
We had a lengthy discussion about changing the practice from unanimous consent to a
Majority.
vote, right?
Yeah.
I may not have been present. I don't recall that conversation.
I was at a board development. Yeah. So you probably were not present.
Right.
I mean, it's a informal practice that you follow. You're welcome to change that when you think it's appropriate. Tonight may or may not be appropriate depending upon what you all want to do.
If we did a voice vote and one person dissented, then we can move to a roll call vote, just to quantify the vote. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not the parliamentarian here, obviously, but.
Yeah.
Well, you already have an indication that one person will.
Right, will dissent, right.
Okay, so I think we'll have a roll call
Is
then.
The motion is to move it to action.
Right, but what, to Jim's question, which I thought was, is it unanimous or is it not?
We had discussed it at board development to no longer have it unanimous, and I believe it was a simple majority.
Yeah, and that was about calling the question. That particular discussion
Yeah, we were
was about calling-
discussing
was about
other
calling the
means
question.
about.
I thought I remembered was the extensive discussion about moving things to action
It was.
being.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with what that expectation is. I definitely remember the conversation about calling the question.
Me too.
I'm not saying we didn't have the other,
Sure.
I just don't recall, that question relative to moving things to action. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah. Well,
I don't recall that conversation either. I do recall calling the question. They're very different in my mind.
okay. I'm not sure how to proceed. So I guess we could go ahead and take the roll call, and I think I might just ask for a quick recess to figure out what would be the best route forward. So I think we
we're
should do
roll
the roll
calling.
call
Is to move to
on-
action.
To
on
action.
moving it to action.
Okay.
Mr. Fozard?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
No.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Vidal?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, so that motion is passed, and I think I'll just call a quick recess to, yeah.
If I may, we did not really have discussion, so I didn't give a reason, but perhaps
Okay,
before we
go ahead.
recess, I could give a quick,
Yeah, well,
very quickly.
sure.
It really goes to that we do put out an agenda, people look at it. There have been certain things we move, and certainly when there's no objection, especially research projects, it can make sense, or where there's an absolute timeliness. But to the extent that the public looks at things, listens to us, and that we even get a chance to think ourselves over things as a general practice, and this has been longstanding, I've been very hesitant to move things to action unless there is a absolutely critical reason, or it says, so that was my reasoning tonight.
Okay. What was the time, in terms of the timeliness of this versus 2 weeks from now, what was the, is there?
Honestly, it just gives us an opportunity to meet and discuss our teams.
Yeah.
I don't think that 2 weeks is going to be a huge setback. It'll set back IRP from reserving those dates with the trainer that we've effectuatedly said it is an equity expert. So that's a risk. I'm not sure what kind of elevated risk that is, if it is or isn't.
Whether we
So-
could lose the services of that individual.
Pardon me?
If that individual was booked,
Right,
otherwise we might lose that opportunity.
right.
Okay, all right, thanks. I'm going to call a quick recess then. All right, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. After some discussion with our parliamentarian, I think the best route forward is, if the sense has been the prior practice has been unanimous consent on moving things to action, that's what we will do this evening. And so this will be an action item on the next agenda, which would be February 17th. And in the meantime, I think I would like to request that we take a look at our meeting policy and make sure that however the majority of the board wants to approach this issue of moving things to action, I think it just needs to be codified. So, however that, after some further discussion, however that would be.
If I could, we can't be presumptuous per se, but I'll make a statement that I would encourage the district to go ahead and lock in dates with the option, with the knowledge that you'll know for sure in 2 weeks or something, like, if there's a concern that this person that you desire may not then be available. I think that is a worthy risk to take. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, agreed.
I understand that too. Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay, so then moving on to information discussion, item 2 is a board resolution on Pennsylvania student assessments shown in attachment 6A2.
Thanks, Fern. I know that we've discussed this a couple times in culture, climate, and learning, and Fern has tightened it up a little bit, so to speak, so it's a little more focused than the one we did a couple years ago. So I'll turn it over to Vern, since he's been running point on this with our team and the CCL group. So thanks, Vern.
Absolutely. Good evening, members of the board. Just a couple highlights or revisions from our last resolution. Really trying to focus this resolution on the PSSA, taking some of the language out around the keystones because there has been some relief provided by PDE, allowing students alternatives to keystone exams. And so keeping this cleaner, keeping it focused on PSSAs, which are elementary and middle school. I do want to point out, I changed, we were a little bit more specific around time in our last resolution. However, in discussing with our curriculum directors and some of our administrators, it's a little risky to put times on assessments because some students take half a day on an assessment, some students take 2 hours. So really just wanted to, kind of state that it was several hours over a several day period. Just to, update you, it's 7 assessment days at the elementary level, 3 for language arts, 3 for reading, 2 for science. And then at the middle level, and science is only at 4th grade at the elementary, and at the middle level, it's 6 days of assessments, 3 for reading, 2 for math, and 1 for science. So again, keeping it a little more broad. And the intent here is to really develop a resolution that promotes alternates to the state-assigned PSSA assessment. Of looking at an assessment model that's more respectful of students, that provides teachers with ongoing information of students' performance so that teachers can adapt instruction to better meet the needs of students, and also utilizing an assessment tool that does that while also correlating student success towards grade level standards. And so there are assessment tools out there. We are actually using an assessment tool that does most of that, and now MAP has developed a product called MAP Throughway that takes the MAP assessment to the next level and correlates that to the grade level standards. So we didn't want to hone in on a particular product or assessment tool in here. The other piece to this is really petitioning PDE to pursue what's called an innovative assessment demonstration grant, which provides districts within a state to become innovative with assessment and pursue a different tool other than the state mandated tool. There are a few states who have done that. We would like for PDE to consider allowing SCASD to jump into that. However, the state would have to complete a grant to the U.S. Department of education giving us the ability to do that. So that language is in here as well. So I just wanted to give a few high-level updates and entertain any questions that you might have or suggestions for revisions.
Scott?
The only question I had was relative to the grant. Are there actually funds associated with that grant, or is it strictly dotting an I, crossing a T, so we have the approval?
My understanding is it's dotting an I and crossing a T to get the approval.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Any other
I
questions
guess
or
a
points?
comment and a question. So on its face, this seems like a no-brainer to me. It seems like being able to utilize data and to be more respectful of students' time and to sort of look at their progress and to be adaptive to their needs makes complete sense to me. What am I missing? Like, what are things that are drawbacks, or what's the trade-off here?
A potential barrier, as I see it, is, you know, when we embarked on the online assessments last year with PSSA, when I was discussing that with our contact at the state, at that time only about 30% of districts in the state are utilizing the online PSSA. And a part of that is many districts lack technology infrastructure and are not as fortunate as we are to have a one-to-one initiative, or even the technology infrastructure, and that obviously would present a barrier to some of this. So I could see folks at the state level seeing that as a potential barrier.
Although, as it was pointed out, because of the fact that it's not a standardized test that everybody gets the same questions, you don't have to have one-to-one capability in order to pursue this.
Right.
It's taken at multiple different times.
Right,
That's, yeah, correct.
right.
That is correct.
Which is what seems respectful to me.
Absolutely.
So something I wanted to point out about this is that in 2015, the Pennsylvania School Board Association, in conjunction with PDE, held a 3-day sort of roundtable discussions on issues related to assessment, teacher evaluations, and several other items. And the result was a white paper, which I shared with the board by email last week as a reminder of what came out of that. And this resolution very closely reflects the recommendations that came out of the assessment working group of that PSBA roundtable working session.
There are just a couple of relatively small edits, Vern. Under the heading, therefore be it resolved.
Yes, sir.
About halfway through, you repeat the phrase regarding an innovative assessment system. And I think essentially the way that would work is going down to the end of line 3, evaluate an innovative assessment system that is intended and designed to meet the academic assessment and statewide accountability system requirements.
Actually, I marked it down on my paper already.
Thank you.
Sounds really good. And also, it's the Every Student Succeeds Act. ESSA is the piece of legislation. So
Oh, yeah, ESSA.
that's the
Yep.
previous
Well-
label, previous term for that.
It's a version of ESEA.
It is a version of ESSA, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that those specific sections of ESSA are the same, Title I, Part A, but I think just those kinds of refinements I think might be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Fern.
No problem.
Laurel?
Yeah, I think this is a generally good idea and respectful. The question that I had someone actually ask me over the weekend that I realized I hadn't dealt with, and it may go somewhat to what Lori was saying about how come anyone could object, is that the PSSA results are published. Yes, they're a year in, but they were never really they were more intended to tell outsiders things about a school. And I don't know that we've even thought about what part would tie into that. So it was a question I was asked. I didn't have a good answer. It's not really necessarily for this because all of this stuff is still valid, but it is something that that could give someone a reason to say, sorry, this isn't what we're talking about. So
I'm not sure I understood the question.
it was more a comment, not a question. That what this doesn't do is say this school, 85% of kids here and 90% of kids here and 30% of kids here, because it's more ongoing and it's intended to be which is why it's
I think
respectful,
Vern might have
which
an
is why we
Yeah,
want it.
it would actually. There is an ongoing component with MAP that looks at beginning, middle, and end, and looks at achievement and growth over that time period. But also with the MAP throughway assessment, it will
That's what you were
tell
talking
you that a student performed at 85% success on grade level standards. So it will correlate the end of the assessment at the end of the year back to grade level standards and a student's proficiency level on grade level standards.
So we're not with this objecting, for lack of a better term, to reporting those year-end things to be part of that, which would be another level that I think many of us feel that that's not necessarily the best way to evaluate schools
Well,
in the
NWA
first
is,
place.
is very much aware of those requirements, and so the tool they have revised is to accomplish it.
To meet that
exactly
requirement,
that.
correct. Yep.
And I think the concern is, yes, that if we're not going to be allowed to do something that doesn't provide that, then, that would be a different resolution, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're having some follow-up discussions since your legislative meeting recently, so I think if you do approve this, we would, turn that over to the legislators as a reminder that, hey, our board did, here's this isn't just this is our board majority approved this, or unanimous. Because you've been here and they've asked, well, what do you want us to do? What do you want to see? And this, in speaking with PDE, would likely, if enough legislators said, hey, PDE, take a look at this, they would kick up a process. And PDE shared with me, they looked at this, and one of the negatives, which I think we'd want to make sure our teachers have a chance to voice, would be they felt like those 3 assessments during the year could cause teachers to feel like it's dictating curriculum. And it gives them information as a math teacher regarding what my students have and have not mastered in regard to those standards at that particular grade level. So I'm not sure, at least I get to see it while I have the students.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand
Yeah,
that concern.
I don't understand the concern. As long as I'm not being evaluated on that fall 1 hour assessment or the January assessment. I want the year to work with those students to, master these.
Well, it also, make the obvious point, if the assessment says the students don't understand a subject you haven't covered yet, well, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So any further edits, I think we would want to get those to Vern if we have
That's
any
good.
minor edits between now and the next meeting. So, all right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so our next item, item B, under information discussion, is facilities and grounds, and we're going to be looking at a Memorial Field project update. This is shown in attachment 6B1. We have Ed Poprick at the table with us for this.
Okay. First, I will tell you that we have actually updated the presentation from the one you saw from last week. We've had some great weather, and progress has continued to the point where if you drive by today, it doesn't look like the pictures I sent you last week. So we have a couple updated pictures to show you how things are even moving on a daily basis. Starting with this picture, just to help you understand some of the nomenclature, and I think to make it confusing for you, we've decided to call one piece the north building and the other piece the south building.
Doing the north and south thing again, I guess.
Yes. We've been doing it in our project meetings, and I never envisioned coming to the board with this. And just as we're putting this together, I'm thinking, we should have come up with a better way, but just, that's the way we've been calling these buildings. So the north building is the new construction, which includes the locker rooms, training rooms, and circulation areas under the bleachers, as well as the public restrooms under the bleachers. The south building is the area that is the renovated portion of the basement of 131 West Nittany Avenue. And then, of course, the north ramp is the ramp that is towards Central Parklet, and the south ramp is the ramp that borders Nittany Avenue. You'll see in this picture, what you're going to really notice here when I flip slides, we had shown you a piece of the building that's tarped under some plastic there, and that was done to allow masonry work on the walls in a controlled environment. Well, lo and behold, if you go out there today, you will see the picture to the bottom right is the plastic removed and the walls are complete. So this is the viewing plaza and the concession stand. So we do have the walls complete at the concession stand area, and that will allow us to bring the trusses in for roofing to that area and keep that moving along. You can see in the upper picture that we have plumbing rough-ins going into the south building, which is, again, the basement of the old 131 West Nittany Avenue. This picture has been updated as well. I believe in your packet, the steel is not there. Steel began arriving on Thursday and is being installed at a very good clip. Love the 60-degree days. The contractors love the 60-degree days. So even this picture of steel is outdated, as we took that on Friday, and it's even further along here today. We have completed the majority of the footers and the foundations for this project, which I described in the memo as being significant, particularly as we're looking at change order contingency with a good deal of the in-ground work either done or being quantified at this point. These are the foundations for the south ramp, which borders 131, or not, the West Nittany Avenue street, and that will be the ramp that connects the existing bleacher project over to the rest of the stadium. So you have full circulation back and forth around the stadium when that ramp is complete. Concrete walls being installed at the north ramp. This will be the ramp that allows vehicle access to the stadium, and there will be some stone that coats pieces of that wall, those wall sections that you're looking at. In terms of overall progress, the substantial completion date for this project is contracted for July 31st, 2020. We are projecting on schedule at this point. I mentioned as well in your memo that so far on change orders, we spent 1.28% of the established 5% contingency for change orders. We do have some exposure, but with the current condition of the work, we believe we're in good shape in terms of the change order contingency. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just want to mention the good news that there have been 0 recordable accidents during the history of the project.
Been a great team. We really feel like the people are working well together, good coordination.
Great.
Been good in that regard.
Good stuff. All right.
Yes.
Is the north ramp, is that how the marching band's going to get down too? Is that?
I would imagine.
Okay, yeah.
It would be the most, it would mimic the way they had in the past.
A little
Yes.
thinner.
Yes, but less dangerous in terms of slope.
Traction.
They could probably move a little faster down this ramp. You have to move in very small steps down the old ramp.
Right. It's good news. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay, so the next item is under goal category fiscal stewardship, and we're going to be looking at an update from the Solar Power Purchasing Agreement Working Group, and this is shown in attachment 6C1. think we'll have Randy Brown at the table for this item.
Gretchen, you want to start things off?
Sure. So, yeah, this is an update on the solar purchasing power agreement. And I think, well, I know that in finance, there was a discussion about the fact that SCASD will become the lead organization. And I don't know if everybody on the board is privy to that, but here it is for full board to see. There's reasons for that are legal pertaining to what CATA needed, but it turns out that everybody seemed to be very positive about having SCASD be the lead organization. So, and then the rest of the memo is really about dates and what will happen when. And the date that we would be wanting to pay attention to is in the second paragraph there. The SCASD Board of Directors will need to vote on the approval of the intergovernmental cost-sharing agreement for an energy consultant sometime between February 2nd and March 24th. And after that intergovernmental cost-sharing agreement has been passed by all the different entities, then at that point, the RFP could go out. So, and an important thing for all the board members here to be aware of in that vote is that by creating that intergovernmental cost-sharing agreement, that's where the hiring of the energy consultant and any legal fees pertaining to that would be shared amongst all of the entities. And of course, just to refresh your memory, that would be according to energy usage. So SCASD is about 50% responsible for that because that would be our share of the energy usage. So this is not to purchase energy. That's a completely different phase. It is just the hiring of the energy consultant, and that's how we are able to determine whether we would be able to save money on our energy bills. So, Randy, did you want to add anything, or Jim?
Just at the finance meeting next week, we'll have the latest cost-sharing agreement document for review. It'll be also as an information item at your next meeting, and then in a meeting in March, you can approve it. After you review it at your next meeting, then we'll share it with the member agencies for their distribution.
Question, on March 25th, where it says sign intergovernmental agreement, who signs the documents to create that then? Is it the liaisons from, so would it be like you and Jim signing, or whose signatures are?
The document that I most recently prepared would have you and them signing it out.
Okay.
Because you would be approving it formally at the district.
Yeah, after our board, because our board would have
Right,
voted.
right.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, that was my understanding, is that each board approves it, and then they sign the agreement.
when they approve it. Yeah, that
You know,
makes
their
sense.
leadership signs the agreement.
Okay. It was just a little confusing because of the date. Made it sound like there was an event that day to sign it.
Oh,
so.
the reason why that date is prominent is because that's the day after the due date of all of the entities approving it. And so
Makes
then,
sense.
as soon as everybody's approved it, then it can be created.
I see. Makes sense. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
No, I just saw that the one thing, it says February 3rd, SCASD approves their role as lead entity.
Yeah. No,
We-
yeah.
Do we need to
It's a good
do that,
question.
or can that wait till?
I think that can wait and be part of your acceptance of this document.
Oh, okay.
When we actually
lo-
approve
So
the
we'll talk
document.
about it in finance and then.
As long as everyone here is fine with us continuing to move forward in that process, I don't think it means an official action. It's just that was the next meeting after the last SPPA meeting. And as I told them that we wanted to have, this would be our first opportunity for discussion. So as long as everyone understands and is supportive of moving forward, then I don't believe we need a official action.
All right. Any other questions?
Just thank you all
Yeah,
for
for
your
the
work
work.
on this. I know this
Yeah.
is, it's been a journey, and you're doing a lot of work, so thank you.
Yep, agreed. All right, thank you. So then the next item is under district goal categories policies, as shown in attachment 6D. And I think we have Linda Pierce and Jonathan Klingeman here to introduce policy 908, which has been discussed in policy committee a number of times.
No, well, I thought Jonathan would, yeah, either of you can begin. And I mean, this has come to policy. The policy committee has revisited it, looked at it a number of times, tweaked it, but, yeah, I'll let you take the lead on.
So we are required legally to have a multitude of policies. As Jonathan and I talked through our legal requirements, what we came up with was to revise our existing 908, develop a regulation for that, and then we're suggesting we create a new 908.1 because we need to have a policy that strictly speaks to the Title I schools. Now, you're going to say everything else.
So this has actually been in ESSA for quite a while, but the Department of Federal Programs has not been monitoring schools on it because it's a pretty confusing thing that they've been sorting through. So ultimately, anything that in ESSA that says policy that is related to Title I essentially has to be board approved. So this has been being tossed around at a lot of our trainings over the past 2 years. And ultimately, what has happened is that the district itself has to have a parent engagement policy, parent and family engagement policy, and so do our schools. But the problem is that these policies are supposed to be revised and looked at every year and be breathing documents. So to do all of that and then to come to you regularly with these types of changes seems a little redundant. So after that had been vetted out through the Department of Federal Programs, what the monitors decided to do was create a policy that schools can adopt that uses all of the language that is extremely clear as to what the policy would be. So as long as ESSA is what it is, the policy stays, and it's the plans or the administrative regulations that can change as needed. So on a yearly basis, I meet in the summer with families that are interested or coming in to talk about the district's plan, and then our school, Title I schools, through their regular beginning of the school year experiences, also do the same. So they update theirs. And again, there may not be updates at all, or many, maybe just, word here or there, but ultimately, it's something that we have to do. So we've put this together, and a lot of it is coming directly from what Department of Federal Programs is recommending, and they've actually asked us to send us our policy once we get it approved, so.
And I guess I should just say that Jonathan came to the policy meeting and presented us with these really already well-formed documents, and what has happened since is, and this is a tribute to the work that you did in preparing all of this, and all we really did was kind of went through it and made determinations about what would be most applicable for shaping this to be more personal for the district, but, the work that you did on this was great, so.
Thank you.
So was the language provided by them, or okay, so that makes this next question a little bit odd. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me, but hopefully you'll be able to identify. There's one phrase in there that talks about 1%, assuming the 1% of Title I funds.
Correct.
And if that is more than $500,000, which would not be the case for us, I'm assuming.
No, we actually do receive over $500,000 in Title I funding.
But it's the 1%, so it's 1% if your Title I funding is over $500,000.
Correct. So our Title I budget's about $745,000, so that about $7,000 is what we take off the top that we provide for parent and family engagement activities.
So I don't know, if you get a chance to look at that sentence, it seems like the first part of the sentence ought to be referring to something, like if that makes any sense to you, like it ought to. Laurel, it's not in your head, like I know what I'm talking
It's
about.
on the 908R, and it's part of the regulations. Is that where you're looking?
It says if the district reserves 500,000 or more, and I think it means if it receives, I think it's just
sets aside.
It,
Now, if it reserves 500,000, but it's, we receive 500,000 and more, right?
What page are you on?
the reason why I think it probably says reserves is because title monies can flow in between title grants. So that could be kind of why.
Actually, it's reserved and not received.
Yeah, Title I's a little bit harder. You don't really take money out of Title I, but like, for example, the other title grants, you can move them into Title I or move them into Title II. So that's probably why that's there, especially because Department of Federal Programs was trying to write one general policy for every board to be able to kind of use, because it's a lot of work if
It
not.
just doesn't make sense that they're telling us to do this because it's in the law anyway. I mean, it just, you know what I mean, when we talk about what we need to put in policies, well, if it's already in the law.
All right. You've been listening, I understand.
So.
In this case,
Not
the
always
law
a-
is that you have to put in your policy too.
Correct,
Put the
yeah.
law in
Not
the
always
policy.
agreeing, but I do on that one.
Yeah, knowing that we'll be being monitored most likely next year as part of our regular rotation, this will be definitely one that will be a part of it. So we wanted to get it to you early in case, you know, things move
I
around at all.
appreciate you doing that, because there's nothing like a federal audit.
Yeah, really. I think we've been down this road with student services too. There have been a couple of policies that come forward through Jean's office that have the same elements to it in terms of requiring boilerplate language that we wind up approving. There are elements about it. Can I inject something now? I guess there are things in 908 itself that we're stuck with. That the implementation of which seems complicated given the way in which we work on policy. And it's on the second page of 908 that has the highlighted elements. And this was presented to us in the policy committee. It didn't occur to me then to bring this up, but now that I'm having the opportunity to dig deeper into it, I guess the question for me on the second page, the red enhanced text, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th paragraph says, the district conducts with the meaningful involvement of parents and family members an annual evaluation of the content and the effectiveness of the parent and family engagement policy in improving the academic quality of all schools, including identifying barriers, the needs of parents. So it would suggest that families will be involved in evaluating the policy and maybe revising it at that point.
So the way that this is written is that the policy is what it is.
Okay.
It's our district-wide plan, which is the
Regulations.
which is what we look at every year.
Okay.
So every year in May or whatnot, we send out a survey to all of our title schools and title families to check in on a lot of these things. And as we continue to develop, our title teachers are doing a great job at being able to also make sure that our families within all of these different areas are getting a response.
Okay, so the basic parent involvement would tweak the regulations. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, just a couple of questions. We have both Title I schools and what we call Title-like programs. This is required by the state for the Title I, by the Title I programs. Have we considered a similar thing, though, or are we allowed to add into this prescribed formula something that also addresses the rest of our schools? Because I'd feel odd about having a policy for just some of our schools about family and
So every year, we actually have to reach out to the Department of Federal Programs to get permission to run a title-like program, because technically it looks like supplanting if we were just doing what we're doing. So it works out great. We have the system is fine. It works out there. And the way that I've been supervising this piece is pretending, I don't want to say pretending is not the good word, but is taking a look at from that view that all of our schools are title schools. So I actually require all of our title teachers to do the same exact things. And then we use some of our title-like money to give parent and family engagement funds to all of our buildings to be able to engage families in that way. So one of the ones that we do also, we've just been working on it the past couple weeks, is phonemic awareness. We invited families, all of the elementary families in to all of the elementary schools, so we have that flexibility. And because our schools and our demographics are changing, our Title I schools can shift at any point in time too. So that's why it's just easier that we assume that all of our schools are title schools, even though the funding may not all be coming from federal funds.
And
if that
even though
makes
the
sense.
wording in here just says Title I, in practice, what we do as a
Right.
district is,
Right. Most other school districts within the state of Pennsylvania don't have this, title-like programs. So we're kind of unique in that way. But like I said, because we have approval to do it, it's expected that those programs run similarly, if that makes sense. So I hold those standards to the same to all of our schools.
And then the only other question I had, and it may be more appropriate for regulations, I'm not sure, is that it would be interesting, I'd be interested in seeing something in here about how parents are invited to be part of the team that they talk about, because that has been sometimes a communication issue. Have you thought about that? Was it considered to be put into this? I'm sorry, I'm sure you've thought about it. Did you consider putting it in here, or is it more just in the general understanding?
Yes, so it's really, really hard for at least the district plan to get families to come in the summer. That has been the biggest challenge. So we have been using Champs Camp as a way to try to get that message out, and we still try to advertise it, and our title teachers do before the end of the year. But it's really, really hard to do that. So we've been trying to find district-wide parent and family engagement experiences that could happen in the summer, for example, that people would already be coming into the buildings for, and then be able to have these conversations. In the past couple of years that I've been in this role, I've had no one make any changes to it. But, in terms of the schools, at the very beginning of the school year, back to school night, that's when our title teachers are having our parent and family engagement meetings, or their Title I meetings where they're looking over their plans and their compacts and all of that stuff. So it is, again, it's sometimes a roll of the dice to see whether or not families are coming in, and you got to be careful with how federal funds are spent in order to get them to come in. So, for example, we do sometimes allow the purchase of food items because we know that is a nice enticing way to do that. But we really make sure that it's tied directly to that experience, that whole rounded experience as well. So it's really tough to get the parents to be involved in that, and that's why we've been trying to piggyback it with other things that they know they're already involved in. But in terms of advertising those types of meetings, et cetera, we're getting better at doing that and hope that will be out there a little bit more this year too.
And speaking as a parent who was on the parent, the committee to help decide about what parent engagement, or I think there was myself and one other set of parents that came to any of the meetings during that year. So it is, and certainly there was active seeking of parent input, but it's really challenging to.
And we do provide transportation if families need transportation. There's a lot of different things that we will do to be able to do that, but it is just getting that initial engagement. So again, the more we can piggyback, I think the more successful we've had events, so.
Yeah, and I think the one other couple were teachers in our district. There was me and 2 teachers in our district, so, yeah.
It's always been a challenge.
Yeah.
Not just us.
Right.
Any other questions on this? We'll expect to see this probably a month from now, not at our next meeting, but the following meeting for action.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan,
You're
for all
welcome,
your
no
work on
problem.
this. Okay, so then, looking at board committee reports, Finance and Audit had a meeting on January 16th. Scott?
So, on our agenda, I was reelected as the committee chair. We had a solar power purchase agreement update that had no additional information other than being the lead. We talked about playground equipment procurement, and specifically, there were 2 options that the administration presented. One was what we would consider to be a typical bid, where the equipment will be purchased under part of the contract with the contractor, and another where the equipment could be pre-purchased directly from a vendor, and then the contract with the contractor would essentially be site work and installation of said equipment. And that second option provided typically preferential pricing and also mitigated risk relative to the equipment and what was going to be offered, et cetera. The administration at the meeting was recommending moving forward with option B, and the committee endorsed that. Brady, is that coming back for a board decision, or is that just moving forward?
Bids are, bids for the playground equipment, I think we just need on Monday.
Okay.
We'll review at the special facilities and grounds meeting next Thursday.
Okay.
And then the board decision on the
Go from there. Okay. We also had conversation on ongoing budget development. Specifically, there were a couple items discussed relative to how additional requests, budget requests, are evaluated, whether it's based on needs or capacity or exactly what. And there was some consideration of getting some form of a list of requests with a sense of the category that these requests would fit in, and whether the administration supported filling the need or not, and just trying to get a better understanding of how that process worked and the relative priority of those requests, but not getting involved in the approval of said requests. So this was strictly an informational kind of conversation. We talked about both athletics and activities. And the primary point on the athletics is for us to all to remember that we have to report a great amount of information to the state under Act 82, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of the information that we look for relative to athletics and equity really is already there in one form or another in the information that's presented to the state. And then on overall activities, just recognizing that there are different allocations in the activities, just primarily because of different budget designations. So it's more how things are sliced and diced versus whether there's, a dollar in both places, because the dollars could be split in many different buckets from that. So it's pretty complicated relative to the activities, but definitely a recognition that we want to get a sense, a better sense for that. But again, from an information, not an approval standpoint. I think that's all that was covered.
All right. Okay, Communications Committee, Jim?
Well,
Yeah, and I
Amber chaired it for me.
chaired part of the meeting. Jim arrived.
Very much appreciate.
Yeah.
We did talk about the annual report, and Mr. Rosenblum updated on the progress of that. It's 75% complete. You can see that in the notes. We also talked about, and I think you saw it reflected today at the way we were redoing the way communications and what appears at the front of the meeting instead of toward the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
And so you saw that reflected today in the last meeting. And then we talked about our community coffee and our desire to have a couple more of those, and it's an action item on Lynn Tressler and my agenda to come up with the next two. So that's
We talked about doing a lunchtime and then an evening after work time slot.
Good.
So.
Decaf.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Okay. Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee?
We had a number of items, one of which was on this evening's agenda. Actually, the draft resolution regarding Pennsylvania state assessments was one of the agenda items. We talked about, there was also an item related to the health curriculum with the recommendation of the not just proposal, but the plan to move the responsibility for fifth grade discussion of the human reproductive systems from the classroom to the phys ed program. So a portion of the students' phys ed scheduled class period would be dedicated towards dealing with human reproductive systems at the fifth grade level. And so it's not a change in the content, it's the same content, same curriculum, just a different source of delivery through the health and phys ed teachers. But that led to a larger discussion about the nature of the human sexuality elements within our health curriculum, and in terms of what areas of possible need for revision might exist, which is down the pike. That's not going to happen in the immediate future, but it got into the discussion about functional and developmental needs of kids, got into some discussion about the place of health instruction at the 6th grade level, where there seems to be kind of a void there between 5th and 7th grade. And a number of elements like that came up in the discussion, rather lengthy discussion. And we also talked about a science update in terms of the science curriculum. The science curriculum is under review, and we're constructing it ourselves based on the next gen standards. But one of the things they're discovering is that the first units that have been produced are leading to the need for discussion and feedback from the elementary classroom teachers regarding the need for redesign or revision of the units, to the extent that there might be hurdles that are encountered in the first units that have been developed. It's led the curriculum department to think about, the elementary curriculum staff to think about changing the pace of the introduction of these units so that we can do it well. And so that will involve this feedback loop between the elementary classroom teachers and the committee working on these science revisions within the curriculum. And finally, there was a discussion of strategic planning and the meaning of the reading and math assessments for various sub-aggregated groups, and looking at the numbers that Mr. Bach presented, generating a discussion about the importance and significance of differences that were occurring between different groups in terms of their performance on the reading and math map assessments.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so you can see then the schedule for upcoming committee meetings, and then moving to future agenda planning, what we'll have expected for the February 17th. And then we need to have an exec session after this, correct? I thought there was one item that Randy had a request for us on, so.
I'm sorry?
Do we have any need for following this meeting?
For exec? Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so with that, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we are adjourned then.
Oh, yeah.